I went over to my friend's house, and his mom didn't act like a mom that night. It started as a simple message, innocent enough that he almost dismissed it. Hey, the house will be empty tonight. Wanna come over for a bit? His friend's mom, someone he had known for years, had texted him directly. Normally, he would have ignored such an offer. After all, she was his friend's mother. Well into her 40s, confident, graceful, and always just a little untouchable in his eyes. But there was something in the way she wrote, casual yet warm, that stirred a curiosity he couldn't shake. Standing outside her front door, he hesitated. He ran a hand through his hair, telling himself it was just a friendly visit. The soft evening light filtered through the trees, casting long shadows over the pathway. The smell of freshly cut grass mixed with the faint scent of her home. Something comforting, like home-cooked meals and warm coffee lingering in the air. His heartbeat sped up, though he wasn't sure if it was nerves, anticipation, or something else entirely. When she opened the door, she was exactly as he remembered. Elegant without trying, wearing a simple blouse and jeans that hinted at effortless beauty. Her hair fell naturally over her shoulders, catching the last golden streaks of sunlight. Her smile was warm, welcoming, but there was a mischievous sparkle in her eyes that made him pause, almost forgetting what he was doing there. "Hey," she said casually, stepping aside to let him in. As he passed, her hand brushed his arm. Not a motherly touch, not by a long shot, but light enough to make him aware of her presence, of her warmth. He swallowed, trying to focus on something mundane, like the cozy layout of the living room or the faint aroma of vanilla from a candle on the shelf. The moment inside felt different. It wasn't the usual polite, slightly distant atmosphere he remembered from when he visited as a kid. She greeted him like an equal, a friend, someone who genuinely wanted to see him. The sound of her voice was softer, inviting, and he realized he had never really noticed it before. Not like this. There was a rhythm to the way she spoke, the subtle inflection in her laughter, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled. As they moved further into the living room, he noticed the small details, how she adjusted a picture frame with practiced ease, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air, the warmth radiating from her just being there. A quiet thrill ran through him, unexplainable but undeniable. This wasn't just a friendly invitation. Something about the way she looked at him, the way she moved, suggested that tonight would be different. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He told himself it was harmless, just a visit. But as he settled onto the couch, aware of the soft throw against his back, and caught the way her gaze lingered just a moment too long, he realized that the night would unfold in ways he wasn't ready for. And somehow he didn't want to be. It started with a text, a casual message from someone he never expected to reach out this way. "Hey, the house will be empty tonight. Wanna come over for a bit?" His friend's mom, the woman who had always seemed untouchable in his eyes, was inviting him over. Normally, he would have ignored it. After all, she was in her 40s, confident, poised, effortlessly graceful, and he was just a young man barely out of college. But something about the tone of her message, warm and teasing in its subtlety, stirred a curiosity he couldn't resist. By the time he reached her front door, his chest felt heavier with anticipation. He paused on the walkway, letting the evening breeze wash over him, carrying the scent of fresh grass and distant jasmine. The sky was a pale wash of pink and gold, and he caught his reflection in the window, his own hesitance staring back. A part of him screamed that this was inappropriate, that he should turn around. But another part, quieter yet more insistent, urged him forward. When she opened the door, she was exactly as he remembered. Elegant without effort, casual yet striking, wearing a soft blouse and jeans that complemented her graceful presence. Her hair fell naturally over her shoulders, catching the last streaks of sunlight, and her smile was warm, welcoming, but with a glimmer of mischief he hadn't seen before. She stepped aside to let him in, and as he passed, their arms brushed briefly. It was an ordinary touch, but it sent a ripple through him, a spark that made his awareness of her presence sharpen. The interior of the house was cozy and familiar, yet it felt different tonight. The usual mom persona he associated with her was absent. She moved with ease, relaxed and natural, as if the rules didn't apply for this moment. He noticed little things, the way her fingers lingered on a picture frame as she adjusted it, the soft scent of vanilla from a candle nearby, the quiet rhythm of her voice as she spoke. Everything about her presence felt intentional, alive, magnetic. They settled in the living room, talking casually about mundane topics. Books, music, little things from their days. But there was an undercurrent to their conversation, a silent energy that threaded through every glance and smile. He noticed the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed, how her hand lingered near his when passing him a mug, how the warmth of her body seemed to occupy the space around him more than it should. He swallowed, trying to remind himself this was harmless, a friendly visit. Yet every instinct in him was alert, aware of the subtle pull between them. The room felt smaller, warmer, as if the universe had shrunk to hold just the two of them. And as she laughed softly at a joke he barely caught, her gaze resting a heartbeat too long on his, he realized that tonight wouldn't be ordinary. It wouldn't be like any other visit. Something unspoken hung in the air, a tension neither dared name yet both recognized. And for the first time he found that he didn't want it to be. Once inside, the house felt different from any memory he had of it. It was familiar, cozy, orderly, softly lit. But tonight, there was a warmth to it that went beyond the physical. She moved around with ease, humming softly to herself as she put away a few dishes, her presence commanding yet comforting. He followed her, trying to act casual, but his senses were alert to every detail. The faint perfume that clung to her hair, the soft click of her slippers on the wooden floor, the gentle curve of her shoulders as she leaned over the counter. She gestured toward the living room with a casual wave, and he noticed the way her eyes lingered on him before she turned. It wasn't a motherly gaze, not at all. There was a softness, yes, but also an unmistakable curiosity, a subtle appreciation that made him keenly aware of the space between them. He swallowed, telling himself it was his imagination, but the flutter in his chest betrayed him. They sat on the couch, a comfortable distance apart, and she poured them both a cup of tea. As she handed his mug over, their fingers brushed, lightly, fleetingly, but long enough to send an unexpected warmth up his arm. She smiled, not the polite smile of a host, but a real, genuine curve of her lips, as though she understood exactly the effect she had. He tried to focus on the steam rising from the cup, the faint sweetness of the tea, anything to distract himself from the tension simmering between them. The conversation started casually. Books, music, small updates about life. Yet even in these simple exchanges, there was a rhythm developing, an unspoken connection that neither of them rushed to define. He found himself noticing little things, the way her hair caught the light when she tucked a strand behind her ear, the delicate tilt of her wrist as she gestured, the way her laugh lingered in the room longer than necessary. Each detail, insignificant on its own, compounded into a growing awareness of her presence that made his chest tighten in a way he hadn't expected. At one point, she reached for the blanket on the couch and draped it across her lap, and instinctively, he moved slightly closer, as if drawn by some quiet gravity. They shared a soft laugh when the blanket nearly brushed his knee, a small, ordinary moment, yet charged with attention neither acknowledged aloud. He became acutely aware of the warmth radiating from her, the subtle scent of her perfume, the quiet hum of the house around them. There were pauses in their conversation that weren't awkward, they were intimate. Moments where their eyes met and held, just long enough for the space between them to feel electric. She didn't act like a mother. She didn't talk to him as a kid, or as a friend's son, or as someone she needed to guide. She was simply herself, soft, inviting, present, and he couldn't help but be drawn to her in a way that felt thrilling and frightening all at once. As the evening deepened, he realized that the ordinary had become something extraordinary. He was here under the pretense of a casual visit, yet he was acutely aware of how every glance, every brush of hands, every shared smile carried an intimacy that was unspoken but undeniable. And though he tried to focus on normalcy, he knew already that this night would linger in his memory far longer than it should. The conversation shifted slowly, almost imperceptibly, from casual chatter to something more personal. They had been talking about books and music for a while, the comfort of the familiar stretching around them like a soft blanket. But then she mentioned a small regret from years ago, a missed opportunity she hadn't told anyone about. Her voice was softer now, quieter, and he realized he was leaning in without thinking, caught by the weight of her words. He listened, trying to respond naturally, but all the while he was noticing the little things. The way her fingers tapped the edge of her mug when she spoke. The way her eyes seemed to glimmer with a mixture of amusement and vulnerability. There was something rare in this moment. She wasn't performing the role of a mother or a friend's parent. She was herself, entirely, and the honesty in her voice pulled at something inside him that he hadn't expected to feel. At one point, she laughed softly, covering her mouth, and he noticed the faint warmth that radiated from her even in that simple gesture. His gaze lingered a little too long, and he felt her notice it. Her eyes met his for a brief second longer than necessary, and there was a flicker there, an unspoken understanding that neither of them put into words. It was electric and terrifying all at once. As the evening continued, the air between them seemed charged with a quiet tension. She reached absent-mindedly for her hair, brushing it back over her shoulder, and his hand nearly grazed hers on the couch. They both froze for a heartbeat, aware of the electricity in that near touch, but neither pulled away. Instead, they settled back into the sofa, letting the moment stretch, unspoken but deeply felt. He realized he had been holding his breath without noticing, the room seeming smaller, warmer, more intimate than it should. Every glance, every gesture, felt heightened. The soft tilt of her head, the subtle curve of her smile, the way her voice softened when she spoke directly to him. It wasn't a casual visit anymore. It had become a quiet dance of attention and awareness, a slow pull towards something neither of them was ready to name. At one point, she paused mid-sentence, her eyes flicking to the window as if considering whether anyone could see them, and then back to him. That split second held a weight that made his chest tighten. He wasn't sure if it was fear, anticipation, or something more dangerous. A mix of desire and hesitation that made every word and glance between them feel infinitely charged. The night continued in this delicate balance, a fragile tension suspended over ordinary moments. A laugh shared too long, a brush of fingers over a mug, a gaze held a heartbeat longer than necessary, each detail threading a connection that was impossible to ignore. For the first time, he understood that she wasn't just his friend's mom tonight. She was a woman with layers, complexity, and vulnerability, and he was discovering sides of her that were thrilling and unnerving all at once. By the end of this part of the night, he felt an awareness he couldn't shake. There was something shifting between them. The safe, familiar boundaries of their previous relationship were quietly dissolving, replaced by an unspoken intimacy, a tension that neither dared voice, but both understood. And deep down, he knew that nothing about this night or about her would feel ordinary ever again. By now, the night had settled into a rhythm of quiet intimacy. They sat across from each other, mugs warming their hands, the living room lights casting a soft glow over the familiar furniture. The casual air of the evening had shifted entirely. What had started as a simple visit now carried a quiet weight neither of them could ignore. She leaned back on the couch, eyes tracing the lines of his face, a soft smile playing at her lips. "I didn't think I'd enjoy your company this much tonight," she said, almost as if confessing a secret. Her voice was low, deliberate, intimate, drawing him closer even though he remained on the other side of the room. He swallowed, unsure how to respond. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. He was aware of the slight quiver in his chest, the nervous energy he felt whenever she glanced at him just so. It wasn't just a compliment. It was a recognition, an acknowledgement that their connection had shifted, and it both thrilled and unnerved him. I feel the same," he admitted softly, his voice quieter than usual, almost a whisper. Even saying it felt daring, like crossing a boundary that he wasn't supposed to. Yet he couldn't deny it. There was a pull between them, subtle but undeniable, a tension that had been building with every shared smile, every lingering glance, every accidental touch. She leaned forward slightly, and he felt the warmth radiating from her closer than before. Her fingers brushed the edge of the blanket on her lap, near his, and he froze for a heartbeat, acutely aware of the electricity in that tiny contact. They shared a quiet laugh, soft and tentative, but it was layered with meaning. Neither spoke, yet their eyes conveyed everything: curiosity, desire, and a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. For the first time, he noticed the depth of her vulnerability, the way she let down her guard entirely in this private space. She was more than the poised, confident woman he had always admired from afar. She was human, real, and achingly present, and he was drawn to it in a way that both excited and frightened him. She leaned back slightly, her gaze lingering on him, thoughtful. "I don't usually do this," she admitted, her voice soft but steady. "Invite someone over like this, and talk like we're more than what we should be." There it was, the unspoken tension made explicit, yet carefully worded to avoid saying what they both knew. He shifted slightly on the couch, aware of the closeness but unsure how to bridge it. His hand brushed against hers again, almost by accident, but she didn't pull away. The room felt smaller, warmer, intimate. Their shared silence carried the weight of unspoken desire, a delicate line between what was appropriate and what was electric in its impossibility. By the end of this exchange, the unspoken truth was clear to both of them. There was a bond forming tonight, a connection that went far beyond casual familiarity. They couldn't name it yet, couldn't define it, but the awareness of it filled the space between them like a quiet, thrilling pulse. And neither wanted to break that moment. Not yet, not ever. By now, the atmosphere in the living room had shifted completely. The easy comfort of earlier conversation had deepened into a charged quiet, a slow rhythm of awareness and anticipation. Every glance between them, every soft laugh, carried layers of meaning neither dared voice aloud. The distance on the couch seemed smaller than it had before, the air between them warmer, heavier with unspoken emotion. She picked up a small book from the coffee table, flipping it open and holding it toward him as if to show him a favorite passage. "Look at this," she said softly, her fingers brushing against his as she turned the page. The contact was fleeting, delicate, but it made his pulse spike. For a moment, their eyes met, and the air between them seemed to thrum with quiet tension. Neither moved away, neither spoke, but both were acutely aware of how close they were. He shifted slightly, and their knees brushed lightly under the blanket draped over the couch. It was almost accidental, but neither pulled back. Instead, the brush of warmth lingered, and he realized how aware he had become of her presence, of the subtle curve of her shoulder as she leaned in, of the softness of her voice when she spoke directly to him. There was an intimacy here that went beyond words, a closeness that felt both thrilling and dangerous, a delicate edge neither of them wanted to test but couldn't ignore. Her laugh broke the silence, soft and airy, and he found himself drawn into it, leaning in just enough that their shoulders touched. She didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head toward him, her gaze curious, almost daring. He noticed the way her hair fell over her cheek, brushing against the edge of his hand as he reached to adjust the blanket around them. It was such a small gesture, so ordinary, yet it felt monumental in the context of the night. For a few quiet minutes, they simply existed in that space, aware of each other in a way that was almost tactile. The room seemed to shrink around them, the muted glow of the lamp, the faint scent of her perfume, the warmth radiating from her body as she shifted closer, creating a private world where only the two of them existed. Every small movement was amplified. The tilt of her head, the lift of her hand, the brush of her knee against his. Finally, she spoke again, softly, almost as if testing the boundaries. "You're different than I imagined," she said, her voice low, intimate. "Not just your age, you're, present. Really present." Her words hung in the air, weighted with meaning, acknowledgement, and desire, all carefully balanced with restraint. He swallowed, realizing that tonight had shifted something fundamental. This wasn't just a casual visit anymore. It was a shared moment, a private connection charged with tension, warmth, and subtle intimacy. And though neither of them spoke the words aloud, they both knew that the line between friendship and something more had blurred. Just enough to be unforgettable, just enough to leave them both aware of what they felt and what they weren't yet ready to name. The night had been suspended in a quiet, delicate intimacy. Every glance, every brush of fingers, every shared laugh had pulled them closer in ways neither could fully name. He had become acutely aware of the warmth radiating from her, the subtle scent of her perfume, the softness of her voice, and the magnetic presence she carried. But reality has a way of intruding, no matter how cocooned a moment feels. The sudden jingle of keys in the lock snapped both of them out of their shared bubble. The front door creaked open, and the familiar sound of her family returning filled the room. Instantly, the tension shifted, replaced by the abrupt awareness of propriety and the world outside their private space. Their closeness, the intimacy of the night, had been a fragile secret, and now it was exposed, if only for a brief instant. He felt his chest tighten, a mix of longing and guilt swirling in his stomach. He hadn't expected to feel so protective of a moment that had been both thrilling and terrifying. She shifted slightly on the couch, a subtle adjustment to put distance between them, though her eyes lingered on him longer than necessary. There was a quiet acknowledgement in that gaze, a wordless conversation about everything that had just happened, a shared understanding that neither would speak of aloud. The room felt suddenly colder, the warmth of earlier moments replaced with a tangible reminder of the boundaries they could not cross. He noticed the faint lingering scent of her perfume, now sharp in his memory, and the soft echo of her laughter as she excused herself to greet her family. He wanted to reach out, to pause the moment, to hold on just a little longer, but he knew it wasn't his place. As he stood, adjusting his jacket, she met his eyes for a lingering second. The unspoken tension was there, still palpable, but now it was tinged with reality. A recognition that some lines couldn't be crossed, even in the quiet of an empty house. The warmth between them remained, but it was now carefully measured, restrained, a silent memory they both carried as they returned to the ordinary flow of life. He stepped toward the door, and for the briefest instant, their hands brushed again. A fleeting contact that carried the weight of the entire evening. Neither spoke, and yet both understood everything in that single quiet moment. The air between them was thick with what could not be said, a mix of desire, respect, and a hint of longing that would linger long after the door closed. As he walked away from the house, the night air felt sharper against his skin, a stark contrast to the warmth he had just left behind. Every step away echoed in his mind. The brush of her fingers, the sparkle in her eyes, the curve of her smile. It was bittersweet, the kind of memory that felt both like a gift and a warning, a reminder of the fragility of human connection and the tension between desire and propriety. He realized that tonight would stay with him, etched into his memory, a private understanding between them that nothing could erase. Their bond was unspoken but undeniable, suspended in the space between intimacy and restraint. And though the night had ended, the quiet ache of what could have been, and the acknowledgement of the unspoken, lingered, beautiful, painful, and unforgettable. The walk home felt impossibly long, though the streets were quiet and familiar. The night air carried a chill that made him pull his jacket tighter, but inside, his mind burned with the warmth of everything that had happened. Every step echoed with memories of the evening, the brush of her fingers, the way her hair fell over her shoulder, the softness in her voice when she laughed at his jokes. He tried to shake it off, telling himself it had been just a fleeting, extraordinary moment. But the truth was undeniable. The night had changed him. He replayed every glance, every laugh, every accidental touch, analyzing them with the obsessive curiosity of someone who has glimpsed something forbidden yet beautiful. He remembered the way her eyes lingered on him, the subtle sparkle that hadn't been there before, and the way she had allowed herself to be vulnerable in his presence. It wasn't just attraction, it was connection. A quiet, electric, undeniable bond that went far beyond the ordinary. As he passed the corner cafe, he paused, staring at the dimly lit windows. It struck him how ordinary everything had seemed outside the house. Yet inside, he had entered a world that existed entirely apart from normal life. A world where roles, rules, and expectations had dissolved, leaving only two people who had truly seen each other. He felt both exhilarated and conflicted. The thrill of closeness, the warmth of shared intimacy, and the tension of unspoken desire were intoxicating. Yet he knew he couldn't cross certain boundaries. The memory of her smile haunted him most. It had been gentle, knowing, filled with a mixture of amusement, longing, and restraint. It wasn't flirtation in the reckless sense. It was quiet, measured, deliberate. It had said so much without words, leaving him aware of what existed between them, and what could never be fully claimed. He realized that this night was a rare gift, a private connection that would linger in memory, shaping the way he thought of her, of closeness, and of desire. He thought about the boundaries they had both respected, the delicate line they had navigated so carefully. It had been thrilling to feel her presence so near, to share those moments of laughter and vulnerability, yet it had also been sobering. He understood that some connections are not meant to be realized fully, that the power lies in their quiet existence rather than their consummation. By the time he reached his doorstep, the first hints of dawn were brushing the sky. The city felt empty, but in his mind, the night was full, alive with everything that had happened, everything that had been left unspoken. He knew he would return to the memory often, not with regret, but with a quiet appreciation for the intimacy they had shared. It was a bond that would linger, shaping him in subtle, profound ways, even if it remained unacknowledged in the daylight. And as he stepped inside, he realized that some moments don't need endings. Some connections exist in the space between what is allowed and what is felt, in the quiet memory of warmth and laughter, lingering glances and unspoken understanding. That night with her was one of those moments. It would remain with him forever, not as a romance completed, but as a memory that changed him, that deepened his awareness of connection, desire, and the beauty of emotional intimacy. If this story gave you chills or made your heart race, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more slow burn, age gap romance tales. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if you found yourself in a night like this? And turn on notifications so you never miss the next story that makes you feel every stolen glance and lingering touch.